quiet town of Burlington, Vermont on November 24, 1964, Theodore Bundy was born. He appeared to be an ordinary young man with a promising future, but beneath his charming facade, a sinister darkness lurked. As Bundy grew up, there were glimpses of a troubled mind. He was an intelligent and well-spoken individual, but there was a darkness that set him apart from his peers. During his trial, two of his friends came out and said different things about him. The first one said, quote, "Ted was a bit different, you know. He was smart, but there was always something off about him. He seemed to keep a lot to himself." End quote. The second one said, quote, "Looking back, I remember him having a strange fascination with violent imagery and disturbing stories, but we never thought much of it at the time." End quote. During his high school years, Bundy's interests in voyeurism and theft began to manifest. These early signs of deviance would later escalate into something far more sinister. In college, Bundy's transformation into a monster began. He became adept at manipulating those around him, concealing his true nature behind a mask of charisma and charm. Bundy's now ex-girlfriend said, quote, "Ted was incredibly charismatic. He was charming, intelligent, and seemed to have his whole life ahead of him. But there was always something lurking beneath the surface." One of Bundy's professors said, quote, "Bundy was an exceptional student, but there was a darkness in his eyes. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I knew there was something troubling about him." Close quote. It was during this time that Bundy's reign of terror began. He started to target young women, luring them into his web of deception and eventually subjecting them to unspeakable horrors. Bundy would often feign injuries or use other ruses to gain trust of his victims. Once he had them in control, he would unleash his sadistic desires upon them. Bundy's killing spree stretched across multiple states, leaving a trail of fear and devastation in his wake. His ability to blend in and manipulate his victims made him a formidable and elusive predator. One of the survivors said, quote, "I can still remember the fear in his eyes as he approached me. He seemed so normal, but deep down I knew something was horribly wrong." Close quote. A detective working on his case also said, quote, "The Ted Bundy case was unlike anything we had ever seen before. We had to connect the dots between various crime scenes and piece together a profile of the killer." Close quote. Bundy's victims ranged in age and background, but they all shared one unfortunate fate: falling into the clutches of a sadistic and calculated killer. From young college students to innocent girls walking home alone, Bundy showed no mercy. I'd like to let this little section be to name some of the people that he killed. So some of his victims include Denise Nausland, a young woman who disappeared from a crowded park during a summer concert; Janice Ott, a young woman who vanished on the same day and at the same location as Denise Nausland; Karen Sparks, a teenage girl who disappeared from a nearby town, leaving her loved ones desperate for answers; Linda Healy, a college student who was taken from her own bedroom, leaving her roommates in shock and disbelief; Karen Campbell, a nurse who was vacationing in Colorado and tragically crossed paths with Bundy. These are just a few of the lives brutally cut short by Ted Bundy. Each victim had dreams, aspirations, and loved ones who still mourn their loss to this day. As the body count rose, law enforcement agencies from different states joined forces to bring Bundy to justice. It was a race against time to stop him before he struck again. One of the detectives working on the case said, quote, "We formed a task force dedicated to capture Bundy. We meticulously analyzed the evidence, interviewed witnesses, and followed every lead we had." End quote. Another one said, quote, "It was a relentless pursuit. Bundy was cunning and constantly on the move, making it difficult to pin him down," close quote. Bundy's nomadic lifestyle and ability to blend in allowed him to evade capture for years, taunting law enforcement at every turn. But on February 15, 1978, Bundy's luck finally ran out. During a routine traffic stop in Florida, he was apprehended, bringing an end to his reign of terror. Bundy's trial became a national spectacle, captivating the nation and shining a spotlight on the horrors that he had committed. It was a chilling reminder that evil can hide in plain sight. A legal expert who viewed the trial said, quote, "The Bundy trial was a pivotal moment in the criminal justice system. It showcased the importance of forensic evidence and the need to hold individuals accountable for their heinous actions," end quote. The trial unfolded as a gripping courtroom drama, with Bundy representing himself, determined to manipulate the proceedings and maintain control. Bundy's charm and intelligence were on full display as he cross-examined witnesses, attempting to cast double evidence against him. His charismatic presence captivated both the courtroom and the media. One journalist said, quote, "It was like watching a chilling performance. Bundy knew how to command attention and manipulate the emotions of those around him," close quote. The second one said, quote, "The trial became a media sensation, drawing large crowds and intense public interest. People were both fascinated and horrified by the details that emerged," close quote. Throughout the trial, the prosecution presented a mountain of evidence against Bundy, including eyewitness testimonies, physical evidence, and the chilling accounts of survivors, close quote. No, well, not close quote, but anyways. One of the prosecutors said, quote, "Building a case against Bundy was a monumental task. We had to painstakingly gather and present evidence to ensure justice was served for the victims and families," close quote. One of the defense attorneys said, quote, "Bundy was a formidable opponent in the courtroom. He was cunning and skilled at exploiting legal loopholes and creating doubt," close quote. Despite Bundy's attempts to manipulate the proceedings, the overwhelming evidence against him proved inalterable. On July 24, 1979, Ted Bundy was found guilty of multiple counts of murder, kidnapping, and other charges. The jury recommended the death penalty. One of the victim's family members said, quote, "The verdict brought a sense of relief, knowing Bundy would never harm anyone again, but it could never undo the pain and loss that we experienced," close quote. One of the survivors said, quote, "It was a bittersweet moment. Seeing Bundy held accountable for his crimes provided closure, but the scars he left on my life will never fully heal," close quote. Bundy's sentence was upheld on multiple appeals, and on January 24, 1989, he was executed in the electric chair at the Florida State Prison. During his time in custody, Bundy managed to escape from prison not once but twice, leaving authorities and the public in disbelief. Prison officials said, quote, "Bundy was an intelligent and resourceful individual. He exploited weaknesses in the system and took advantage of opportunities to make his daring escapes," close quote. One of the law enforcement officers said, quote, "The first escape occurred in 1977, when Bundy jumped out a courthouse window and evaded capture for several days. The second escape took place in 1978, when he climbed through a hole in the ceiling of his cell," close quote. Both escapes showcased Bundy's ability to manipulate those around him, exploit secret vulnerabilities, and leave authorities scrambling to recapture him. Massive manhunts were launched to track down Bundy after each escape. The nation held its breath, fearing that he would resume his killing spree. One of the investigators said, quote, "Escapes added another layer of complexity to the Bundy case. It was a race against time to bring him back into custody before he could harm anyone else," close quote. One of the witnesses said, quote, "I remember the fear and panic that spread through the community. People were on edge, locking their doors and looking over their shoulders. Bundy's escapes had a profound impact on the public's psyche," close quote. Despite the chaos, by his escapes, Bundy was eventually apprehended and returned to prison. The failures of the justice system preventing these escapes highlighted the need for stricter security measures and better protocols in handling high-risk prisoners. This is like really deep stuff, and I've shown you enough creepy pictures of him, so for the rest of this video, I'm just going to show this cute puppy. Okay. Understanding the psychological profile of Ted Bundy is crucial in comprehending the mind of a serial killer. His case has fascinated experts and psychologists who have attempted to unravel the complex web of his motivations and behaviors. A forensic psychologist said, quote, "The Bundy exhibited traits consistent with psychopathy, a personality disorder characterized by a lack of empathy, manipulative behavior, and a prosperity for violence," close quote. A criminologist said, quote, "His ability to charm and manipulate others was a key aspect of his modus operandi. Bundy was an adept at persisting a facade of normalcy while concealing his dark and violent urges," close quote. He would often use this charm and intelligence to gain trust of his victims, luring them into dangerous situations with a false sense of security. Thank you for watching this video on Ted Bundy and his victims, and his psychological profile and how much of a weirdo he was. If you want to dive deeper into this chilling tale or explore other true crime stories, check out my channel and see what other ones I have that you might like. Remember to stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.